Welcome everyone to another session of our Global Employability Expert Series. My name is Mirta Aguirre. I'm the head of Employability and Coaching at Virtual Internships, and I'm very happy to have you here to share this very interesting conversation that is going to go around the following topic. So our webinar today is From Public Policies to Tech Giants. Learn the career secrets that allowed Nicolas Andrade to create a successful career working for companies like Facebook and Zoom. And who is Nicolas? Who are we going to spend the next minutes with? And let's meet him. So Nicolas is the Director of Government Relations for Zoom in Latin America. Prior to Zoom, he worked in Facebook's public policy team and managed the Latin American Olympic committees at the Rio 2016 Olympic and Paralympic Games. He has a master's degree from the University of Oxford in public policy and Latin American studies, and an undergraduate degree in politics with international relations from the University of Bath, both in the UK. His professional path has included wearing many hats. He has worked as a strategic communication consultant, has captured moments as a photographer, run his own business, and even volunteered as a firefighter in India. So our session today, in our session, we're gonna have a relaxed conversation around many interesting topics, right? We're gonna discover a little bit how he created his professional path, and he's gonna share some of the main lessons he learned throughout his career. He also will share with all his experience now what the key skills you need to succeed in your career and the current market, job market are. And we're gonna discuss a little bit, how is it to work for tech companies? Do we need to necessarily be programmers, have an IT background to work at Facebook or Google? And then we'll let it flow and see the idea is to really take advantage of Nicolas. So I invite you all to share all your questions. So welcome, Nicolas. Thanks for being here today with us.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for that kind introduction. And it's great to be here with everyone connecting from around the world. It's really exciting to see all of the different places that people are joining in from.
Yeah, and we're very excited. You are currently in Brazil, right?
Yes, I'm based in Rio de Janeiro nowadays. I have a remote job. I work for Zoom, but I'm based here in Brazil. I sometimes work from different places, but I'm usually based here in my apartment.
Nice. And I guess you are part of, like me and many of our participants today who have the opportunity to work remotely, right? So we're gonna discuss a little bit more in depth about the benefits and the challenges of remote work. But first of all, I'd like to get to know you a little bit more. Can you tell us a little bit? You have created a really interesting career, right? We've seen you started one thing, and then I want you to let me tell you a little bit about what you do now and how you've created your career a little bit.
Sure, that'll be a pleasure. I think starting a career, starting a job, starting a new phase is always a bit of a daunting moment. And I was quite frustrated because I didn't know what I wanted to do. So my perspective was, why don't I try a number of different things, see what I like more, see what I like less, follow my instinct and see whether it's right or it's not. And that's kind of how it started. But even before that, before university, before the finishing school, I think what really drives a career and what drove me at the time was a curiosity to do something different. In that case, when I started my business, a very, very small business selling things online, was, can I make this work? Can I create income out of nothing? It was more of a challenge and a curiosity of discovering something new. So discovering something new is definitely something I would tell you to have in the back of your mind for the rest of the session and in your job search. When I finished university.
Yeah. Please.
When I finished university, I started thinking more about, what do I want to do as a job? What do I want to have as a career? And there's a lot of pressure from the outside, whether it's from family, whether it's from society, from your professors to follow a certain career path or certain industries. And at the same time, a very big difficulty, I think, that people underestimate of finding that first job. Those first opportunities are very tough to find. You often have to do a lot of internships that can be unpaid. You have to join jobs that you may not be 100% interested in. And so that was kind of the road that I took, was trying to find internships in places that didn't even offer them, writing directly to people. Can I join your company? Can I join your organization for a period of 2 or 3 months? And often, even in very well-structured places like an embassy, I managed to get that work experience. And even though I wasn't being paid for it, I went into an embassy, I worked there for 2 months, and I discovered that the career path that I'd once dreamed of, which is being a diplomat, was actually nothing to do with what I wanted to do.
Because that degree you studied, what was your first degree?
My first degree was in politics and international relations at the University of Bath. And I chose to then turn that into a master's at Oxford because I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do. And a master's degree in something that I was more interested in, which is Latin American politics and economics, seemed obvious to me at the time because I wasn't really sure what else to do. And after that, I did another master's degree, partly because I was on a scholarship, but partly because I also still wasn't sure what I wanted to do. And I kept kind of postponing the decision. And it was frustrating to see other people go out into their career paths and having successful careers at my age, and at the same time feeling like I was a little bit stuck. So if there's one thing I would leave you guys with, is be patient. Everybody goes, not everybody, but most of us go through quite a tough and long process of figuring out what we want to do and where. And that's something that you shouldn't let you down.
Yeah, and I like something you said, very interesting, right? Like, I really relate to you because I also studied politics and international relations. And in my case, I started with an idea of what my degree should allow me to do or how my career path should develop, right? And of course, one of those things were diplomacy. In your case, you said, okay, I'm going to work for an embassy and really try to start my career. And then what happened? You said, maybe this is not what I want.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what happened. I had a really great manager at the time. I was very supported by her, and I just figured out that the day-to-day work that was happening there was important and it was complex, but it just wasn't something that motivated me. And I felt actually more motivated by the place where I was, which was Ecuador at the time. And that's when I started thinking that it's not just important to know what you want to do, but it's actually quite important to know where you want to be as well. And that feeds into our later conversations about remote work or flexible work. But sometimes it's more important to be in a city or in a country where you really are excited to explore and to be. And that may be your own country. It may be your city. It may be your own house. But it's important to be in a place where you feel comfortable, where you feel like you're learning, where you're engaged.
And how, because one thing I was very surprised when I was looking at your LinkedIn, that, by the way, please remember, one of our goals in our webinars is to really connect to each other. So please share your LinkedIn profiles and add each other. Remember, it is always better to add someone to our networks by sending a small message. Hey, we met from, or we still don't know each other, but I'd love to invite you to my LinkedIn network. And so when I was preparing for this talk, I was looking at your LinkedIn profile, and I was surprised by the many things you did, right? That was one thing that I was like, wow, this is amazing, because you started politics and international relations, but as you mentioned, you have had your own online business, you have worked as a photographer, you have even been a firefighter. Is that correct, in India?
Yes,
can you tell me a little bit about that?
Absolutely. And that's exactly what I mean about being curious about going after what you think is interesting. It can be a video game, it can be a sport, It can be in hobby like photography. I was very interested in photography. I still like photography, but I figured out it probably wasn't wanted to do as a career. And the way that I got this photography job, for example, was writing to a magazine, and they had a team that was leaving the next day and they didn't have a photographer. And they knew I had a camera. It was a travel magazine. It was to photograph hotels and restaurants. And they hired me on the spot. I mean, it was incredible. And you'd be amazed how many opportunities you can find like that outside of traditional structures. But sometimes just being curious and going with the flow. When I was at school and I did my last 2 years of school, the equivalent of the A levels in the UK or the IB or the last 2 years of high school, whatever it's called in the countries that you are in India, as part of a system called United World Colleges. And when we were there, one of the very big challenges is that we were in a very large campus. It was very rural, far away from any city. And after the monsoon rains came and the fields started to go dry, very, very big fires would come over and threaten to burn down the entire campus, including our homes, ourselves. Anyway, and so what we had to do as a response at the school and as part of a group of students was fight those fires on a weekly basis, pretty much, sometimes for days, in order to make sure that they didn't burn down our campus. And that was actually one of the most interesting and engaging and fun things I've ever done. And I never, ever would have tried it out if it wasn't for curiosity, for being in the right place at the right time, and for deciding that, you know what, yes, that is something that I want to do in addition to my studies or in addition to any other endeavors that I choose to have right now. I'm going to make time for something different that's not just socializing and try something new. And I loved it.
And I wonder if this is something that has come up in a job interview, for instance, right? Something that you shared, that someone would say, oh, you have an experience as a firefighter, which mainly in an office we think, I don't need that, right? I don't need a firefighter. Did you have the opportunity to perhaps translate the skills that you learn as a firefighter? How could that be useful, perhaps? Or, something that you could learn from this experience that from at the beginning, one could say, like, I don't know how this relates or how this gives me any, useful experience for a job. Do you have that opportunity to do this translation?
Many of the jobs that I've had have been metaphorical firefighting. And so I think that having experience as a real firefighter has been actually quite an interesting thing to bring to not actually job interviews, but certainly to job conversations with managers and with colleagues at different points in my career. If there's one thing that teaches you, it's to keep calm and to persevere, much before the word resilience was in vogue like it is now. When you're standing there in front of these fires for hours and hours, it's very, very, very tiring. And you have to be really focused because it's dangerous. And because, like any real firefighter will tell you, it's dangerous, it's really hard work. And I found that kind of resilience and that kind of perseverance and ability to endure physical difficulty in that case helped me a lot later on in life when I started running, for example, or when I started working at the Olympic Games. We had very, very little sleep. We had very difficult circumstances. And certainly when I started working in companies where we had some very big moments, like at Facebook, now known as Meta, where you were always jumping from one project to the next and looking at issues that could have big repercussions for the company locally or globally. That kind of ability to actually stay calm in very stressful situations is something that companies and managers definitely look for, because having somebody on the team who gets very nervous very quickly, it can be difficult for a larger group of people.
Excellent. That's what I was looking for, because sometimes when we think, especially when we still don't have lots of work experience, we may feel a little bit lost in saying, how can I show that I do have skills that are useful for work, right? And well, you guys here are doing a virtual internship, which is giving you this advantage of working on real projects and then getting to know a little bit more of what you do, the skills you develop. But even if you do some other volunteering that apparently we may say no one is going to need a firefighter for a company, right? Because I'm not working with that. But as Nicolas explained, there are many skills that we can develop through another volunteering scheme, something that is perhaps not related directly with a professional path. But when we start doing this unpacking, and when we start, hey, look how all the skills I need, and actually super useful, right? And I can see if I see Nicolas' resume that he has this experience, I can say, well, probably, as he said, he can manage tough situations, right? And that can be really, really good. So, so tell us a little bit. So you started working for Facebook, now Meta, right? And I'm curious to know, right? How is it to work in Facebook? Many people have this idea that to work at big tech companies like Facebook or Zoom, we really need to have an IT background, right? Or do like have a core, very strong knowledge of the core of these companies. But is it the case? Because you didn't study any IT, right? So you come from public policies, international relations. How is it? What can you tell us?
For sure, for sure. As you know, from the firefighter days, I went through many, many different stages, including the Olympic Games, including many other different experiences. But that eventually ended up landing at Meta, at the time known as Facebook. I no longer work there. I'm not a spokesperson or a hiring person, so I'm going to bring you my own experience, which was that in 2016, fairly early on in the Meta days and the Facebook days, I joined the public policy team. And I think it was a great example of how you can, and it's very, very possible for you to join a large technology company, regardless of what background you have, because large technology companies have the same needs that any other company has. It has, of course, a need for developers and software developers and for people who are interested in all sorts of technical roles. But it also has an enormous need to have people who understand finance, who understand business, who understand marketing, who understand communications, who understand public policy, who understand things like esports. Somebody in the crowd today is focused on esports. All sorts of different goals, because the creation of products and the maintenance of the company, keeping it going on a day-to-day basis, involves roles like lawyers, like compliance specialists, like privacy experts, and not exclusively developers. So I would encourage you to always think that you are a good candidate for these roles in any technology company, whether it's large, like Meta or Google or many others, or a small one. What I joined was public policy. It was a very interesting time to join a public policy team at Meta, and exposed me to a wide array of very, very interesting policy issues and the challenges. And also, I think, enabled me to bring a skill that I have exercised in many different roles, which is being an intermediary between the public sector and politicians, legislators, and people who need to understand the basics of technology in order to find ways to work with it and coexist and regulate it. And on the other side, a company where you work with people who have much more of a technical mindset, with engineers who are looking at code, at binary decisions. It's either A or B, either black or white, and politicians who work much more in broad terms. And I think they're two worlds that don't understand each other that well. And having somebody in the middle who can bring those two worlds together and make them gel a little bit in the same way that an interpreter would do, I think is very useful, and a skill that can be used in many, many different industries.
You said something very different, which for me was like a late discovery. I wish I could have known before. As I mentioned, I wanted to, I guess I studied international relations because at one point I wanted to work for the UN, right? And very specific international organizations, which I later on did. I did my internship at the European Commission. And then I discovered that many people, or most of the people who work there, didn't study international relations, right? And I was like, oh, this is surprising. And I had colleagues who were accountants, who were had different backgrounds. And then I was like, so if I could have done the same job without necessarily this background, right? What I mean is, like, sometimes we said, oh, I like to work for a specific company or doing some kind of impact. And we may think, I necessarily need this degree or this specific path. But in reality, there are many options. And as you just mentioned, in Meta, there are many, many people who, as any business, take care of many different roles and tasks. And this is really interesting to reflect, because sometimes we may think, okay, but I have a background in accounting, and perhaps I like accounting, but traditional roles or companies are not very, I don't know, socially focused or fun for me. That doesn't mean that my only way is to work an accountant as a, I don't know, insurance company or a finance company, right? I can definitely be an accountant in a company that also has a cultural, an organizational culture that relates to me, that makes me feel also challenged, right? So what can you tell us about working for Meta? I've seen these articles about Google having all these games and fun things. And is it like that in Meta? What have you learned about the ways of working there, this organization? I'm very interested to know about it.
Very interesting culture. I think I just add one more thing to your previous talk about professions, which is that you can be an accountant and work at any technology company, but you can also study accounting and then do something completely different.
Absolutely.
And so that's also fine and understood and respected. And your own life path and career path will take you in directions that are not linear. And that's expected nowadays. I think in maybe 2 generations ago, that was not. If you studied accounting, you became an accountant. If you studied medicine, you became a doctor. And not all career paths nowadays work that way. They work much more in a partnerships model. And so you can study medicine and then become a business accountant at a firm that sells hospital parts. I mean, there's all sorts of mix and match combinations that you can make. In terms of working at Meta, I think it's a very interesting work culture because it's very intense, it's fast paced, it's very interesting. It's true that the environments that you're in physically, the offices, whether you're in the headquarters in California or whether you're in an office in a region like me, who I was based in Sao Paulo in Brazil, it's just a great place to work because it's colorful. People are generally upbeat. It's very well decorated. There's a lot of local artists that will decorate the walls. There's a lot of effort put into having a pleasant workspace that's engaging and a great place to bring in your clients, your partners, even your family members if they visit once in a while. There is a fantastic food, so you will have a canteen where you can have unlimited food as long as you're okay at controlling how much you eat. I always found that I ate way too much and way too often. But there's a canteen where you can eat even in the headquarters. There are several different restaurants. There's an ice cream place. There's a cookie place. So there's all sorts of food, and then you have.
Is there a gym that you can go
in the headquarters
after all the ice cream you ate?
I think there's a gym. I think at the time when I was employed, you were given some sort of a
membership,
that would help you to pay for a gym. I don't know whether it exists anymore. This is almost ancient history, 2.5 years ago in the tech world, quite long ago. But it's super interesting, and there's all sorts of interesting gear and VR headsets which you can test, new products that are coming out that you can see how they work. And so if you're interested in technology, if you're interested in business, there's all sorts of teams and partnerships that you can also make, because if you have to launch a new product, you don't just do it with a policy team, you do it in partnership with a product team, you do it in partnership with business teams, with marketing teams, and other different people. So it's a great place to meet interesting people who are engaged, who are motivated, who are there for a set number of years, nobody knows how long, and working on extremely interesting projects. I think Also, even the architecture. I remember there was a very interesting setup in one of the offices I used to visit, which was a treadmill, which is the where the machine where you walk at the gym, but on top it had a table, and so you could rest your laptop there and work while you walked, which I thought was a very interesting setup because it had a beautiful view. It was on a very high floor and had a beautiful view. So I think it's just a fascinating place to work. You don't necessarily need to work at Meta in order to have a fascinating place to work, because a lot of companies have noticed that having a pleasant work environment and a pleasant work culture is something that attracts talent and retains talent. And so you should be you will find it easier nowadays than it was maybe 15 years ago to find a workspace that encourages, for example, a relaxed form of dressing, where you can show up maybe just in a normal shirt, even maybe in a t-shirt, depending on the work culture that you have.
Yeah, I guess one of the ideas we have about companies like Meta is like more of a relaxed environment, although you correct me, this is very intense, right? You are working lots of hours and putting yourself what do you think, like someone who is joining Meta, like what are the key skills or like mindset you say, like if you want to really be successful, are Meta or other companies like that, what are for you like the key things that you said, these are the skills you should focus, the mindset you want to really make sure you are having during this experience?
I think the skills are very similar to what I would recommend for a broader access to market, or for first job, your second job, your third job, which are things like try and be a sponge and bring in as much information as you can. Use those first years or those first months to engage in as many different activities and in many different projects as you can to get I'm not sure what the word is in English, but to feel the vibe in a very genuine way and understand also how the product works. If you work with technology, it's vital that you know how the product works. So for example, if you work at Zoom, I played around for a long time to know that, if you see, for example, can you see I'm playing now with one of the settings?
The light.
More lights. That's something I discovered. The sound optimization, so the noise suppression in the background. If I turn it off at the moment and I start clapping while I'm talking, you can't hear what I'm saying. But if I put the noise suppression on high, I'm going to do the exact same thing, and very quickly the system is going to recognize that actually
I want all those tips.
You want to hear my voice and not the clapping. But nobody explained that to me. I discovered it because I spent hours playing with the product. And if you have a tech job, play with the product, talk to the product team, learn about new initiatives. If you find gaps, suggest them. Be a person who tries to solve problems. You don't necessarily need to work 20 hours a day. I think it's more about how you manage your time, how you manage your work-life balance, how you manage your schedule on a day-to-day basis, whether you have gaps between your meetings that you take a mental break, or you are the kind of person who does 15 or 20 meetings in one day, which to me doesn't make sense. I think make sure that you build the human relationships. And I don't mean networking, I mean like real human relationships with people with whom you will spend many hours over the next years, and with whom you will definitely go through difficult moments, because any company goes through ups and downs. Try and find that support, and also the mentorship opportunities, whether that's a formal opportunity, you say, I want you to be my mentor, please, or whether it's more of an informal relationship where you seek out advice from somebody who has more experience in a specific area or in a specific field. And I'd say when you go in, either know what is your superpower or find out very quickly. So what is your superpower? What do you bring? What does Kadma, what does Aaron bring? What does Wenchu bring? Asal, Pia, Lina, all of the people who are here and who will be watching this webinar later, try and understand what is your superpower. It doesn't mean that you are better than everybody else at a specific thing. It means that if you are on a bus, what is the one thing that you do better than most other people? And what can that bring to a team? What can it bring? Because that is something that you will be able to communicate to your manager, to your team, either openly or they're going to notice it. And that is something, that is the sort of the missing piece, what's going to twist the key, what's going to be the missing piece of the puzzle, what you contribute to the team. And a final piece of advice, whether it's at Meta or any other company, is communicate with your manager about the expectations of what you're going to deliver in the next semester or in the next month. Align with your manager what you're expected to deliver and have frequent touch points to inform how you're doing. So be very open with your communication, request feedback. Don't go away and come back 6 months later with questions.
That's super interesting. As the head of coaching here in virtual internships, one thing I see all the time, which is definitely totally normal and expected, and as it's part of our process of developing our professional skills, is how tough communication with the supervisor is, right? Especially when we're starting our careers, where we may be second-guessing ourselves or doubting when we say, I'm not sure how to do this, but perhaps my supervisor is expecting me to do this and know how to do it, and I don't want to ask because then they're gonna think that I don't know, and then this creates, and we may spend lots of time not asking for help or not really saying, like, I've tried solving this first, I Googled it first, I spoke with other person, I tried to solve it, but I couldn't. Could you please give me some guidance? And could you please give me some feedback? And I think that's one really interesting piece of advice for all of us and for our audience who are doing their internships and starting this career, right? And we have a question in the chat. It says, you mentioned building authentic personal relations is key. What is the best way you found to build them when working remotely? And here, this is a great question to jump to remote work. So let's start first reflecting a little bit about remote work. You've been working remotely for how long now?
Well, I started working very remotely at the beginning of the pandemic, like many people. But before that, my role at Facebook was very remote in the sense that I traveled almost every week or every other week. And so I spent a lot of time working in hotels, on airplanes, and airports. And in that sense, I've been working remotely for a far longer time.
And in your experience and everything, well, now we all have a little bit more experience in remote work, but still many people are still working only from home. What have you discovered about remote work for yourself in terms of how remote work is an advantage for you or a disadvantage in your case, like something that you said, oh, working remotely allowed me to discover this about myself and the way I work, I like working?
It's great. It's a great question because I think that remote work touches every person in a different way. And the first thing I'll say is that remote work, in my opinion, is a very, very important factor in democratizing access to work, health, and education opportunities, particularly for those of us who don't live in the major centers of business of the world, whether you are living in a rural area, somewhere, or in a very large city like myself, which is not the business capital of the country. So it enables far larger numbers of people to participate equally in the economy, in job opportunities, and in career growth without having to move themselves and sometimes their families, their children, to a different place where that may be very difficult, visa-wise or money-wise. Remote work, for me, has been a life changer. I grew up in many different places. My family are from different countries. Both of them are from different countries and more than one country. I always missed birthdays. I always missed funerals and baptisms and all sorts of family events. And having a system and especially a platform like Zoom that enables me to have those interactions remotely has been a life changer. It's enabled me to live in a city where I want to live and not necessarily in a tiny, tiny apartment in a very, very large business district of a city like Sao Paulo, like New York. And that's been really interesting. But it's also brought me the ability to work with more flexible schedules, and that's brought me creativity. Having flexible schedules, having the ability to take a 15-minute break on the sofa and come back has made me more creative. I'm implementing a project now in my current job that I can't talk about yet, but it's a project that would not have happened if I hadn't had space to think, if I hadn't had the ability to recreate my work experience in a virtual form, right? Some people work at Zoom in person, some people work hybrid, some people work remote, which is my case. And so I would encourage you to say and to think, what can I do with remote work? What can I do with hybrid work? How can I apply to jobs which would otherwise be, I would be ineligible for them because the office is in Kuala Lumpur, maybe, or the office is in Seattle, and I can't move there for a series of reasons. What can you do? There's all sorts of opportunities that are coming up around the world with remote work. And for those of you who do live in large cities like London, some people in the chat who live in London, it brings even greater opportunity because you actually can go to an office and do hybrid setups with different companies. So you can actually have more opportunities as well.
And what have you, in your experience, what have been the most challenging aspects of working remotely?
I think it touches different people differently, but many people do feel the need to have an in-person touch point with their colleagues once in a while. For me, that's very difficult because they live around the world. They're not in the same country. They're not even in the same continent, actually. And so it's very difficult to get together in a way that's not in person. And so going to Damian's question, how do you build these personal relationships without having the in-person moments is an interesting one. And I would encourage you to not try to just replicate what you do in the offline world in the online world. Do not just maybe have a meeting where you do a happy hour and people try and engage and there's, cutting people off. But you can actually come with all sorts of interesting initiatives or games or icebreakers. You can do activities like escape rooms. You can do initiatives like Two Truths and a Lie. And if you don't know that game, it's a game where you say two truths and a lie about somebody and the other person has to guess which one is the lie or who you're talking about. So I think that there's many opportunities and more that will be found. And if you have a curious mind and you're looking for even newer ones, you can go to the internet or to ChatGPT, all sorts of tools that will give you ideas, which I think will bring a very human side of you to a job and to an employer. If you are the person who says, why don't we all get together for a virtual meetup and I will organize it? That is something that will bring a much needed breath of fresh air to any team. So I would encourage you to have that initiative and be that person who creates those spaces of informal camaraderie and networking.
Yeah, and you said networking. That was my next question, because when we think about networking, right? Well, there are different ways of understanding networking. The way I understand it is like a little bit like you said, in a way of creating relationships with people and really adding value to their lives, or having a really enriching interaction, which when we work remotely may be more challenging to find new people, to meet new people, right? Because if I'm on my computer alone, how do I get to meet new people online? Do you have some advice that you could share? Like, do you use LinkedIn Match? What are your ways of connecting with new people?
I think there's several, but I think LinkedIn is the clear number one for me. That's my opinion. If Mirta, you and I, maybe Damian, we had LinkedIn when we were starting off our careers, maybe things would have been maybe easier, more streamlined, easier to find the right people for sure. I think you should all take advantage of the fact that LinkedIn is a platform that connects professionals in a way that is completely new. I mean, it's not new because it's not from yesterday, but it did not exist for me, for example, when I was starting off my career. It wasn't a reality. Maybe the platform existed, but it was not widespread in the way that it is today.
No, we didn't have LinkedIn.
We didn't have it at all. And there's other ways that you can actually engage with people and lead networking activities. You can join associations which do your profession. If you're into photography, you can join a photography association. But if you're into accounting, you can join an accountants association as well. And they often have networking opportunities. If you are interested in a specific issue, like, I don't know, business in the Middle East, there's tons of different associations and things online that you can do. And they may even have a yearly trip somewhere where you can meet other people that are interested in your area. And for sure, that would lead to networking opportunities. So I would encourage you to, based on what it is that you want to do or what you're interested in or where you live, if you live in a city like London, some of the people in the chat, take advantage that those are cities that have a very, very large network of different activities, associations, organizations, nonprofits. I would say that civil society, and that basically means nonprofits and different organizations that are working to achieve a common goal, whether it is adoption of dogs or whether it is the advancement of civil rights in the internet, those are all nonprofits and civil society organizations, and they often have opportunities for you to participate in projects. So I would say that that is a huge, huge, huge differential first step, a great way to get started, not just in networking, but also in the job market. Try and find those opportunities because they will be a really, really good thing to have on your CV, in addition to any hard skills.
Absolutely, absolutely. Volunteering, doing side projects, that's a way great to connect with other people besides LinkedIn, as we mentioned. And actually, that's how I met you, Nicolas, through LinkedIn.
Yes.
Yes,
Exactly.
I found your profile because I don't know, we have some people in common, and then I started following you. And then Nicolas, at a certain moment, he was looking for some people to do some interview on how we use Zoom to work remotely, and he invited me, and I said, okay, nice, and then I invited him. So thank you for being here, because this is one of the many examples I have about how we can connect with people we don't know, right? Just through LinkedIn. It's amazing. It's really great. And Nicolas, if you had to go back in time, right, and you find your 20-year-old self, what are those key pieces of advice that you could say? You know, like, life's gonna be hard, and yeah, okay, but what are the key pieces of advice you could share in terms of career that you know now that you didn't know then?
I think that the main one is that I would do it all over again. I followed my instinct every step of the way, and I would suggest that you follow yours. When something really screams no, then don't do it, or do it just for a couple of months until you have a better option. But I think the one message that I would leave in terms of my 20-year-old self is I regret not having done greater research on employability metrics of certain courses, on certain degrees. Politics and international relations is a degree with low employability and statistically low employability compared to, for example, in Bath, where I did the university, we had politics and international relations was one track, and politics and economics was another track. Only 30% of the course was different. Only 30%. But that made a huge difference in terms of how easy it was for people who did the economics track to find internships and then well-paid jobs compared to the international relations. Nowadays, I would say that 30% for you, people who are starting their careers now, is basic programming. It's HTML, it's Python, but not just programming. Also, privacy is interesting, compliance, blockchain, encryption, and cloud related services. And that's just in technology. Every area of work, whether you're in finance or whether you're in, I don't want to say accounting again, I've used it so much, I know nothing about accounting, but I'll keep you an example. Every area of work has bubbles that are popping up. Technology is a great example. And if you can be one of those people who knows about those bubbles, you will be far ahead of any competitors. And in technology, those really are things like cloud, like blockchain, like virtual reality and artificial intelligence, like privacy, like compliance, and a number of others. But basic programming will always put you ahead.
That's a really useful piece of advice, especially in, well, now a day where we know how much the importance of technology. And if you said like in terms of like mindsets, right? Like the way we approach our professional development, what could be your main piece of advice? How should we understand and take the professional development process in our career?
I think you should assume you're going to have several different careers in one, and that they're not going to be a linear path. It's going to be jumping from one thing to the other based on your interest, based on opportunity. That you should expect to change companies. You should expect to have changes in interest because not everyone is interested in the same thing forever. You should expect to have to update your knowledge relatively frequently, whether that's in formal education or in an online course or something sponsored by your employer. And you should think a lot about where you want to be, physically where you want to be, what you want to work, but where you want to be, I think, is even more important, because as time goes on, more and more of us understand that what you do outside of work is actually a really big net contributor to your happiness. So keep in mind that mental health is very, very important to your journey from day one.
Yeah, you mentioned that 3 times already, where you want to be, right? And I think that's a really interesting idea, just because of what you said, right? Because we do so much work, so much outside work, and sometimes we may have like this separation between ourselves in our personal life and then work, and actually we're the same person, right? And what we do outside work, what nurtures us, what brings us joy and opportunities, it is, of course, much dependent, as you said, on where we are, right? And in today's world where we can work remotely, then that's a great point to have in mind, as how our personal life and what we do can also contribute to our professional development, and in terms of feeling ourselves better and being able to have a balanced lifestyle. So we're getting to the end of our webinar. This has gone to very quickly. I don't know about you, but it's almost, I'm like, oh, okay. And I really want to invite everyone, first of all, to please share your feedback with us. I've just shared the link on the chat. Please share your feedback, because this is the way we have to improve and understand what you thought about our webinar. So please take 2 minutes. It's just very brief. Open the link so you can have it after we finish our session. So that's one thing. Please share your feedback, and also please be in touch with Nicolas if you wanna know more about whatever he does. You can reach out to him and also increase your LinkedIn network, which is always very useful. And if you don't know yet, which probably you already know, remember that in our internship program, you have 2 coaching calls that are great for you to reflect on your career development, on your next professional steps. And this is a great opportunity for you to start really reflecting on your career. You have 2 coaching calls. If you haven't received the first email to book your call, probably you will. And if you have already taken your first call, then you will be invited to taking the second call. So be attentive and really take advantage of this. Yes, you can have the recording. Please complete the survey, because in the survey we have your email, and then we will email the recording to you. So Nicolas, I really thank you for being with us today. And as a final comment, what would you like to share with our audience?
I wish you all great luck. Please keep in touch on LinkedIn if you have extra questions. The road to your career is not linear. It takes a while. It can take some patience and resilience. but you usually end up in a pleasant place if you follow your gut, if you prepare yourself, if you keep your knowledge updated, and if you keep your networking up to date. Good luck, and don't get disheartened if there's a few obstacles in the way.
Thank you very much, Nicolas. Thanks for your time. Thanks for sharing all this very interesting advice. And thanks everyone for having joined us. And I wish you an excellent day and an excellent week.